All right, brother. Here we go. Another topic for us to dive into.
Here we go. After a string of interviews, Pat, we're back to the questions, the internet, the mercy
Yeah,
of the internet.
we got to get some more. The interviews are fun. We got to find some more
Yeah,
people to
have
get
been.
on there. I will, of course, continue here to pay the bill. So appreciate everybody tuning in, watching, listening, whatever you happen to do. If you want to help support the show and get ferociously fit at the same time, check out the very not random cycles that we offer. No, they're not cycles of steroids. Cycle is just a word that we use for, a protocol of multiple weeks for you to dive into a certain area. And they upload right to the btwb app. There's on-ramp programs for dumbbell, barbell, body weight. There's a whole bunch of get your first strict pull-up, ring dip, handstand push-up, handstand walk, toes to bar, cool stuff there. There's some just straight up barbell capacity stuff. There's a 1.5 mile run program. There's a 12-week just engine cycle of running, biking, and rowing, and check that out. So dive into those things. And then, of course, if you're a gym owner, check out the btwb all-in-one. So you can get your workout tracking, gym management, and billing, not on all these disjointed platforms, all together. Go to btwb.com, check that out. Change your life today. Okay, so here we go. Yeah, change your. I mean, that's
Man,
not. I'm not.
what a statement to end on, Pat. Just a little throwaway. Change your life today. Wow, casually.
I didn't say
Change
for the
your
better or
life.
for the worse, because it'll change.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right. So
pretty
we got a question that I saw out in the ether, and I thought it was an interesting one. And it was from somebody whose handle was Bubbasaurus. And this is what
Nice.
Bubbasaurus was interested in.
No
CrossFit.
surprise after we read the question. I feel like
Yes.
that tracks. I didn't catch the username when
Yeah,
I read the question.
It's a great
earlier.
username. CrossFit versus traditional strength training. Hi, I just wanted to know what is the major difference between CrossFit and traditional strength training? And generally, assuming all other parameters being the same, which person would be fitter, a CrossFitter or somebody doing traditional strength? Okay, the second part there, if anybody in our audience is like, well, that's the most obvious thing in the world. So yes, we'll give that a little payoff at the end as to who's fitter. But I'm curious because when I read this a couple times, what I thought initially changed a bit as I went on. When I first heard them just say traditional strength training, I guess what popped into my mind initially was just what I used to do, like body part splits, more, I guess I would call it more bodybuilding style. Chest and tries, back and bis, sprinkle in some cardio, do some crunches. And then I got to thinking, I wonder if they meant traditional strength training more on like the major lifts of the powerlifting side. When you read it, what was your interpretation?
Oh, I had the same thing. That was my first question. Was like, okay, it's hard to kind of, I guess, anticipate what the user was trying to get at with traditional strength training, because I had exactly the same response where it's like, hey, this could be just a bodybuilding split that you pull right out of a Muscle and Fitness magazine, and that's what you're kind of referring to as traditional strength. Or it could be like you're saying, it could be like a basic 5x5 program that's been around since the dawn of time and is often associated with strength training, but like maybe not if you're just swimming in the mainstream, so to speak. So yeah, I'm really curious what they mean by traditional strength training. But I bet you we would probably be able to pick apart the things that they don't mean. They don't mean they're out the track running intervals. They don't mean that they're practicing some gymnastic skills up on the rings. They probably don't mean that they're out doing rowing, a couple times a week. So there's some things that, regardless of what they mean, we could probably eliminate and take off the table. But yeah, that was my first response too, was what do you mean by traditional strength training?
So I could even, let's see, I'm just going to make a little note here. Give myself a piece of paper, standby. Let's just discuss, we'll hit a ball. We'll hit CrossFit, and then we'll hit what I just consider like bodybuilding style stuff like I used to do in high school, in my younger years. And then let's just say powerlifters, generally speaking, broad brush.
Sounds good.
And this might be a great show for somebody new trying to check it all out for themselves as well. And I would say, as far as right off the bat, CrossFit, bodybuilding, and powerlifting, if I had to create like a little hierarchy or lack of a better way to say it, of just, most bang for your buck. And let's just go ahead and say that, of being capable, ready, looking good, feeling good, performing good, having some strength, having some engine, in the real world, CrossFit's going to be on the top there. I'll tell you why. Next in the list, I would put, generally speaking, somebody's going to take my head off on this. I would say powerlifting, because at least you're doing compound
100%.
functional lifts.
Yeah.
You're going to dead, you're going to squat. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. And maybe there's been, I'm open to the fact that I'm just a dinosaur, evolution from back when I did that bodybuilding style body part splits back in the day. But man, we didn't squat. We did the leg press, leg extension, leg curl. Nobody deadlifted. We did bench and curls and a lot of machine based stuff. So I would put the bodybuilding down on the bottom of the list, ranking those three as far as like just being out in the world and being darn near, ready for whatever comes your way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's the right order, definitively. Especially if we're thinking about bodybuilding, not as like, I'm a professional bodybuilder pursuing this with the kind of intensity and singular pursuit that people will put into that to really get to the top of the heap. I mean, that's a category all on its own, like any kind of physical pursuit is. You're going to see a little bit more bleed over, I think, in that specific application. But when we're talking about just the average gym bro showing up and doing some curls and calling that bodybuilding, yeah, I think that's lowest on the ranking for sure. There's just not a lot of athletic integration. To your point, like the coordination of learning any of these movements is almost by design minimized and thrown out the window. So yeah, I don't know that there's too much argument to be made to put that above the powerlifting, frankly. But what I do think is kind of interesting, like to get to the second stage of this question, which is, like what's better, basically. That's kind of the thrust. I guess what's kind of interesting to your point is that you do see a lot more people doing hybrid type stuff and calling it traditional these days.
And
If for no other reason than it's like fun. It's rare these days that you see somebody who's like, well, I'm just a power lifter and never will I do anything outside of this like narrow rep range. They're doing cardio. You could argue that pushing sleds is a powerlifting activity, but I don't know, is it? They're learning other things. They're incorporating more kind of outside the box elements into their program. That's more and more than
there's
norm.
been a lot of bleed over.
Absolutely. And so given that context, it does kind of make it even harder to pin down, like, what do you mean by traditional? Then to anticipate like what the result is going to be is a little tricky, even though I know my answer. You know what I mean? But I guess I'm just pointing out something that's not new for listeners of the show. But hey, man, over the years, things have gotten a lot less defined, in my opinion, in a good way. Because there used to be these parameters around such things that was like, well, I'm a lifter. I never do X, Y, and Z because I'm a lifter. It's like you don't really see that attitude quite as much anymore, which in my opinion is a good thing.
Yeah, and now you've got something put in my head. So maybe for the benefit of the audience of this question, we'll, to the best of our ability, try to put some more classic parameters around what's CrossFit, what's bodybuilding, what's powerlifting, even though there has been bleed over for sure.
Sure.
That just might be useful in acknowledging that there has been bleed over. Do you think, now this is my random question, I've mentioned this to you before, I think on the show as well, and do you think maybe the bleed over is why? That I thought it was so strange that, if I'm at like my kids' sporting events or just where I'm interacting with other grown-ups, people get to talking, what do you do, blah, blah, blah. It comes out what I do for a living, and then this is anecdotal, I don't track the data, but I feel very confident saying this, that the 90% of the time, if I tell somebody and the word CrossFit comes up, what that person says to me is, oh, I used to do it, but I don't. My brother-in-law did it for a while, whatever. Blew out his hamstring, like some crazy thing. It's always this, it's never, I literally never hear, like, I say CrossFit, somebody goes, oh, yeah, I've been doing it for 7 years nonstop. Everything's great. Like I literally, it would shock me if I heard that. Now, what I brought this up to somebody the other day, and their counterpoint was, yeah, I've had the same experience, but then when you dig into what they're doing, they're not doing classic whatever. It is this mixture where hybrid, where like they're not calling it that, but they are pushing a sled and they're running on a box and they are maybe doing some classic bodybuilding stuff. And they also know how to do kipping pull-ups as well. And it's like, so there has been this like everything's seeped into different areas that you're right.
Yeah.
I think the lines are pretty blurry these days.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's also something in there about mass exposure too. Like when you have something that's really niche and it's going to be a niche mindset that's drawn to it, I think you can expect that those type of people may be drawn to it for a longer period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Versus if you have somebody who is a little bit more kind of mainstream, for lack of a better term, I think it's going to be more often the case that they're going to skip around to different things because they're just not that dedicated to any one thing that way. And it didn't really cost them anything to seek that out. It was just kind of there by a product of being popular enough that it was everywhere now.
Yeah.
And so I think that does kind of create a different scenario where people, their commitment level is going to be different because of that. That's my observation anyway. And I think you see that with any sort of emergent culture, you know what I mean? Like the early adopters of anything are typically the hardcore set that like they really had to dig out that thing. And for that reason, they're all in, and I mean, I'm a good example of that in the CrossFit world, like I think we all from our generation, there was a certain amount of kind of stigma that you had to put up with, whether people even knew what CrossFit was, or they're like, I cannot understand what you're doing. You are clearly insane. Like, why is this so important to you? You had to overcome that. And now that it's just kind of mainstream, it's easy to get in and it's also easier to get out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, understandable. So I guess where we could go with the question of, what starts off with, I want to know what the major differences are between the two. And we'll say between the three, because we'll add, bodybuilding in there.
Yep.
I would say to somebody like, I would chunk it into 3 areas. It could probably be more. Maybe this is just the CrossFitter in me coming out. I would explain this question to somebody as far as what the differences are. I would lump it into movement selection. I would lump it into variety of movements, variance, if you will, or lack thereof, and then to the intensity applied to that particular activity. And if I just start with movement selection, I would say it's the greatest in CrossFit. One of the key elements I would explain to somebody is what a functional movement is, these compound lifts, how they translate out into the real world, or whether you're just living a regular civilian life or you want to have excellent performance on the athletic field, being fitter, faster, and stronger. You're almost not going to see yourself on a machine. Power lifters, generally speaking, we're going to have good functional movements as well. And then, probably a lower selector. They have tons of accessory work, so that might not be fair to say. But then on the bodybuilder side, you're probably going to see, some compound multi-joint movements, but a whole host of isolation movements as well. And there's probably going to be, in my mind anyway, a good amount of time spent on machines as well. So that would be my first movement selection of those 3 different areas. And then, like I said, they could be intensity or variance or whatever you want to chat about.
Yep, I think so. I like those categories. I would add one too, which I think is expected outcome. And I think that's really the dramatic difference there. Like the CrossFitters, expected outcome is not just getting stronger. The expected outcome is I'm going to get better across a range of activities. And there's an acceptance in that, if they're honest, that's like, hey, some of these things may not develop as quickly as they could because I'm developing a range of things in tandem. So there's that element of it.
And then, of course, the expected outcome of powerlifting.
Yeah, is hey, this is all I really care about. Yeah, exactly. I just want to be able to move this barbell. And therefore, that is my metric of success. And that's about it. Like, I don't really care too much about anything else. Is the bar weight going up? Yes or no? And that's kind of the black and white element. And then the bodybuilding, I think that's probably the most nebulous, to be honest. And I think that's often where people who don't really know what they want kind of start. And that's not always the case. Like sometimes people's stated goal is like, hey, I just want to get jacked. Or, you know what I mean? Like,
hey, I just amen to that, man. Yeah.
I just want humongous arms. You're like,
I think there's a huge aesthetic piece to it, 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah, and no problem with that. Hey, there's plenty of worse pursuits than like, I just want to go to the gym and get jacked. Hey, more power to you.
Few people want to look worse.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So more power to you if that's your aim. But I also think that lumped in with that group of people that may have that kind of dedicated focus is just kind of the person that doesn't really know what they want and hasn't really thought about it that much. And that's just the entry point.
Well, and there's a real low barrier to entry with bodybuilding.
Exactly.
I
Sure.
mean,
Yeah.
if it's single joint, I can teach you how to curl relatively
Right.
quick,
Yeah.
and then if you're plopping yourself down in a machine,
Hmm.
it's controlling for you like so. And if you make a bad weight choice, you're not pinned on or anything. You just change the
Right.
pin on the plate, you lift a lower. Like it's just a
Yeah. Just
very
leave the machine.
it's set
You're
out.
okay.
It's this sets, it's this reps, it's regimented. It's probably gonna be the same next week, gonna be the same the
Hmm.
week after that. And so like it's very easy to show up, start, not kind of know what you're doing, say yes, and get into a groove.
Yep.
And it's like you might join the workout of the day and you're like, what in the world is going on here?
Hmm.
This
Yeah.
is people
Learning
are
a
walking on their hands, this
new
guy's up
language.
on rings, like this is crazy. So
Hmm.
yeah, so I say movement selection to start. Then we've got the other two, we covered expected outcomes, which is nice. We got intensity and variance. Maybe we save intensity for the end. Variance, you
Hmm.
know, kind of like I just said right there in my mind, and I'm curious if it's just been too long, you can correct me. But I just remember following my Schwarzenegger encyclopedia of bodybuilding. I had all my Joe Weider stuff, from back in the
Classics.
day.
The
Dude,
classics.
classic. It was the
Yep.
classics, and it was laid out, and it really
Yeah.
didn't change that much. And it
Yep.
was every week was kind of the same. Period. End of story. The weight might go up or down a little bit on the bar for my 3 sets of 10 or whatever, but it was I just tried as hard as I could each time, and that was that. And so there was a variety of movements, but once they were set, they were generally set, and the variance was relatively low. Even if it hit my chest 5 different ways, so to speak, I wouldn't say there was a high degree of variance. It was set in stone, session after session.
Hmm.
I'm obviously quite familiar with the CrossFit side of the house, in which the variance is profoundly high, intentionally so. And then on the powerlifting side of the house, that's what I will admit not as much knowledge as in the other areas. While I know about the primary lifts and I know a small bit about accessory work that might happen, I will admit that I don't know what the breadth and depth of their movement selection might be. It might be profoundly robust. I really don't know.
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, I think there's such a range of strength training programs. I think what you'll find commonly is that the meat and potatoes of the program will be relatively similar, but the dressing around that is going to have a wide variety. A lot of that can be
Hmm.
personalized based on like, okay, what is this individual's personal strengths and weaknesses, and how can we bring those up? You see that happen quite a bit in like a powerlifting program. But I would say for the average person, to keep it simple and to kind of keep it more accessible, you know, programs are pretty static for beginning strength training. There's most of the time, if somebody's on like a quote unquote traditional strength training program, it's going to be pretty vanilla in the beginning because that's all they need to continue to see this development for quite a long time. You take somebody who's kind of a novice lifter, or not even a novice, like a beginner, you put the barbell in their hands for the first 6 months, and you're going to expect to see some pretty dramatic things with just a really minimal buy-in
Oh
for
yeah.
program design and things like that. So there's not really a need for a ton of variety until you start to see that progress slow down. So I think to categorize it for this conversation, we can assume it's like a pretty minimal amount of variance with that traditional strength training program.
And then if we tap into the intensity side of the house, obviously intensity is a key element of the entire CrossFit methodology.
Mhm.
Intensity drives results. We've chatted before about, we've done an entire show on intensity, but it is an absolute critical cornerstone of if you want to get fitter, faster, and stronger.
Yeah.
So you're going to become quite familiar with it in the CrossFit world.
Yep.
I have to tend to think that in the powerlifting session of like, everybody just smelling some sort of crazy salts and smashing each other in the face and blood running out of their nose, that they're going pretty darn hard in a
Yeah.
lot of those sessions.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, oftentimes when conversations about intensity come up, the two communities kind of talk past each other a little bit. Because often when you're in the lifting world, intensity is synonymous with percentage of one rep max.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when you're talking about CrossFit, you're talking about average power output across the entire session.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes because those terms aren't exactly identical, people think that they're talking about the same thing, but they're not. So for that reason, yeah, I think you follow a powerlifting program by design, it has to be intense most of the time as a percentage of your one rep max if you
Yeah.
want that one rep max to keep going up.
And on the bodybuilding side of the house, I mean, again, I'm remembering way back in my mind, like, if I'm trying to get more this week on the bench press for 3 sets of 10 than I did last week, like, and I
Hmm.
slipped on some 2.5s on each side, like, there's going to be everything that I have in the tank struggling, trying to make that happen. But then on the other side of it, at least half the time that we were in the gym there for the 2 hours, it was during our 1 to 2 minute rest periods. We were just sitting around
Yeah.
coking and joking and having a blast as well. I mean, so there's some struggling going on. I'd like to get a little bit more in the bicep curl this week and whatnot, but nothing. And I'm sure back then, like, I was pushing hard and trying hard, and as far as I knew or I'd been exposed to, as the years have gone by, and I have now experienced a different level of intensity on, like, really trying to do a set of 10 on the back squat, really trying to PR my 400-meter repeat, trying to get a lifetime effort on Fran, whatever it happened to be. I was totally unaware of a world and level of intensity that existed that I just had
Yeah.
no exposure to. So I think it is very relative to the actual endeavor in which you're pursuing.
Yeah, I mean, I think those categories are ranked appropriately for level of intensity that the program brings too. I think CrossFit, I mean, again, it's like stated goal is, hey, intensity is really important because it drives the results. So it's right there in kind of black and white that's going to be a key element of the program. Powerlifting, like we talked about, like you're going to have to bring some of that intensity to continue to see the lifts go up. So I think that probably is a second place. And then, yeah, bodybuilding, there's so much range there. And I think that sometimes it's easy to confuse effort with intensity. And just because those last couple reps on a set of 15 bicep curls is difficult does not mean it's intense, particularly when you're putting it in the terms of power output.
Hmm.
You're talking about small muscles. Sure, they're being taxed in a way that's, mechanically disadvantaged and therefore hard. But when you're talking about the systemic response to that, it's relatively minimal because of the isolated nature of it.
And well, I guess that's movement selection, intensity, and variance. And we chatted expected outcomes. And
Yeah.
so now I guess the final part of the question, and generally assuming all other parameters being the same, which person would be fitter, a CrossFitter or somebody doing traditional strength training?
Before we get to that, I
Mm.
mean, I think the first question was really about like who's going to get stronger doing these programs, right?
But you said, what's the major difference between the two, CrossFit and
Yeah,
traditional
okay.
strength training?
Yeah, so I think there's one more question to answer in that, which is what is that difference in outcome? And I'll give you a controversial statement here. From witnessing plenty of and I'm talking about the average person here. So let's set the context.
I can't wait to hear this.
The average fitness enthusiast. I'm not talking about a hardcore, dedicated lifetime powerlifter or a full on got my pro card going to the Olympia bodybuilder. I'm talking the average person who wants to stay in shape and is going through that process. And we have each one of those programs represented by like an average participant.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you there is a lot less difference between the dedicated lifting program and the CrossFit program than most people would like to admit.
Oh,
Meaning, most people
yeah.
that are pursuing the CrossFit program get the benefit of becoming pretty comparably strong, and they get the rest of these other holistic things that CrossFit will expose you to, faster, more cardiovascular endurance, more stamina, more flexibility, more coordination across more movements without a comparable level of strength deficit.
I mean, to each their own. Depends upon what you've been exposed to and whatnot, right? As to what data set you're pulling from. But I'm here to tell you, I get I dabble in this question like constantly,
Yep.
and you're 100% correct. Whether it's a popular opinion or not a popular opinion, I've had it happen hundreds and hundreds of times that it's accurate, and I have a wonderful resource like with Linchpin. So I'll have people
Yeah.
reach out like, hey, interested in the program, this, and especially if they come from more of a quote unquote traditional lifting or a powerlifting thing,
Hmm.
everyone's worried that they're not going to maintain strength.
Are they
No
going to
one's
wither
worried.
away to a beanpole?
I have never had anyone worried about their running. I've never had anyone worried about
Right.
my
Yeah.
my strict dips, and my dip's going to be
Mhm.
okay. No, it is just squat dead. That's what we want to know. And am I going to maintain my strength? Am I going to get weak and all this stuff? Or and frequently we'll say like, I'm currently powerlifting or I'm a
Yeah.
powerlifter. So they will identify as a powerlifter. And like you said, when I hear that, I think like, oh, this is somebody who is like potentially paying their mortgage powerlifting. They've got an 800-pound deadlift, like, and that's
Hmm.
not the
Yeah.
case. Most of it is what you're saying. It's somebody that instead of they're just a jogger in their neighborhood or they whatever, like they like to lift, and so they're a power lifter, and their numbers will come out. And this is not supposed to be like insulting, or it's just a true statement. And since I have in my head they're going to be these sky high crazy numbers, like if somebody said, "Hey, I'm a professional runner. I run a 4:10 mile. I'd like to join Linchpin. Is my mile time going to get worse?" The answer is yes, it is.
Right.
Because you have a
Yeah.
4:10 mile and you have
Yeah.
nothing else. So yeah, we're
Yeah.
now you're going to run a 4:45 mile and we're going to double your deadlift.
Right.
So I'm expecting this like, hey, I'm a power lifter. My 800-pound deadlift is going to go down. And when their numbers come out, it's like a big deadlift that I hear might be 500,
Hmm.
might be, maybe, but it's
Yeah.
usually in the fours, usually, and if not even in the threes every now and then. And I'm like, my friend, you have no worries about losing strength, like none whatsoever. So I do think a lot of the people that are just lifting all the time have this illusion in their head that if I go over to this other style of training, this CrossFit style of training that looks so different, it looks, at least to the uneducated eye, less structured.
Hmm.
It looks confusing. I don't see the periodization. I don't see what jumps out to me as an obvious progressive overload. And I've been taught that if I don't have this periodization and I don't have this obvious progressive overload, my lifts will stagnate or go down, and that's catastrophe. And that's just, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but obviously not the case. And yeah, that's been my on the boots on the ground assessment is all those powerlifters, the meaty chunk, most people, most circumstances, most of the time, have strength numbers that I just see from regular CrossFitters all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
And I think that that gap is increasingly smaller. You know what I mean? I think there was maybe a case for that earlier on
Yeah, sure. Yes, I would agree
when
with
you would
that. Yep.
see, again, most of these disciplines were niche at that time, and I think that's why the discrepancy was bigger. But if you saw somebody who was into powerlifting, it was like, man, it was such a niche thing that they were really into powerlifting and they were quite strong,
Yep.
versus a CrossFitter. The level just wasn't that developed 10, 15 years ago. But now, I mean, you look at the loads that the average soccer mom is putting up at the average CrossFit gym in the average town
Mm-hmm.
anywhere in North America. And I mean, more often than not, it's like, wow, okay, you're outlifting most people in
Yes.
most programs anywhere, it's not to say that you can't find and point to somebody who's a dedicated powerlifter and say, well, look, this breaks the example. Of course it
For
does.
sure.
But
For sure.
yeah, it is interesting. And so I guess that leads us to the final answer, which I mean, I think our audience is pretty obvious, right? Like, who's going to end up fitter? Well, based on what we're talking about, where fitness is a product of being well-rounded, fitness is basically the collection of abilities that you can display at any one time, not just what singular attribute can I be good at. I mean, there's no contest, and I think that's just increasingly clear.
There's no contest if that definition of fitness is broad and
Yep,
inclusive, right?
exactly. Yeah,
But then what I think is probably, if I was talking to Bubbasaurus, what I think
yeah.
is probably, if I said, hey, let's even take the, let's define fit, because he says which person would be fitter, as
Yeah,
maybe what the strength training athlete sees as fitness, which is just
sure.
my total. I want my
Mhm.
total. And I think if we're just, even if we just said fitter means actually stronger at those three lifts, and you had like comparable CrossFitter and seasoned CrossFitter or whatever, or intermediate, for instance, intermediate powerlifter, whatever those metrics are, that it was a level playing field. I don't know. I think it would be a whole heck of a lot closer than that traditional strength athlete would think. And they may even be surprised if they got bested. Like I don't,
Mm.
but if the traditional lifter was better in the squat, press, and dead, I don't think it would be by very much at all. If it even was.
Yeah.
And that's also, not taking into account the other 75 things that the CrossFit athlete would be able to do. But like I said, based upon my interaction with tons of people, the lift numbers they are right there, 100% right there.
And I think what even kind of tips that more in the favor of the general CrossFit athlete versus the general strength training participant is what they can display on lifts that are not just squat, bench, and dead. So for example, if you have somebody that's all they're really developing, yeah, there'll be some carryover to some other things. But the first time you have somebody who maybe they do have that 500-pound deadlift, but they've never done a clean in their life, sure, they'll be able to move some weight, but man, it's not going to be pretty, and it's going to take them quite a while to catch up to somebody who maybe has that less ability to display that absolute strength in the 500-pound deadlift, but man, they can clean the house. They can clean a lot better compared to the 1 rep max than that other individual might be. So in that case, who's stronger? You have somebody, athlete A with the 500-pound deadlift, but can barely clean 200, and you got athlete B with a 400-pound deadlift, but they can clean 275. Well, who's stronger now? It's like it becomes blurry really quickly. As soon as you start to get outside that accepted definition of strength is just these 3 lifts.
The old productive application of force.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, I think upon review, I'm probably going to keep training how I've been training. I didn't know if this would sway me. Maybe it would sway me,
Yep.
And what's funny is I'm obviously like yourself, like hardcore into this, and people might sometimes make that assumption that means that I walk around with blinders on, and maybe I do. Everyone has their biases, right?
Sure.
But we were saying before the camera clicked on that we're wonderfully fortunate that we get to do these interviews with people from all different communities, all different everythings. And there's fascinating nuggets in each of those of different training principles, methodologies, experiences. But it largely, most of the time, just reinforces that if I'm looking to do the most effective and efficient way of training that gives me the most bang for my buck and doesn't waste my time and gives me the broadest depth of capacity, I just don't know of anything else that works better right now. And it's like we say at the level ones, like if something else works better, that'll be the workout of the day tomorrow. Like but just right now, I haven't seen it. This is right now, what I'm going to keep doing.
Yeah, and man, I'll expand on that and say that I think one of the coolest things about it too, people talk about infinite scalability as a feature of the program, and yes, that's exactly right. You can make it accessible for anybody, no matter what their starting point is or where they're at. But you can take that the other way too, and you can modify the program to your own personal taste in an infinite amount of ways. So maybe Bubbasaurus isn't quite ready to give up the strength training and dive all in on CrossFit. Well, guess what? You could still do, just off the cuff, 2-3 days of strength training in a traditional fashion, and then one kind of mixed mode training day on the tail end of that week. Start towing in that way and, see what happens. There are so many ways that you can apply the program and tweak it based on your own personal taste and interest that, there's really no reason not to kind of dabble with that. And I'll say the older I get and the more involved I am with this sort of thing, those conversations around purity tests of like, well, what is classic CrossFit and where's the line with that? It's like, I kind of don't care,
Right.
It becomes less and less important. Obviously I want people to not waste their time with the training time they do have. And I'll try to steer them in the direction if I think like, hey man, most of what you're doing is kind of not worth your time. I'll let you know. But that being said, if somebody comes in and says, hey, I really like to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm not that keen on this other stuff, but I understand it's like eating my vegetables, I got to do it. I'm not going to be the one that says, well, get rid of all that stuff that you like to do and only focus on this one thing. It's like, for what, So anyway, just another point that you can expand that infinite scalability in both directions, and you can tweak this to the point that you're like, this is the perfect mix for me. I get what I like. I get what I need. I'm happy doing all of it. And then, that's where the good stuff happens.
I'll leave the audience at home with maybe a little treat if they want to partake in it. This is something that I did the other day, and as any CrossFitter would do, it was so god awful that I'd like to share it with other people.
Oh boy,
because
never gets old.
True friends like to see other friends suffer. I mean, who's kidding who? And so it's one of those workouts where it's it's as hard as you want to make it be. If you do it moderately, you will wonder why I threw this out. If you do it like your family's held hostage, it will deliver the juice. And it's just 3 rounds for time, 12 burpees, and 12 calories on the air bike. That's it.
Yep.
That 8 calories for women. I did it on the Rogue Echo bike. My wife did it earlier in the day, and even though like there's like the difference in calories, it's like I think I can get her on this. And so when she came in, I was like, "What'd you get on that?" And she's like, I think I can't remember right now, but she was in the low 4s, and I was like, "Okay,
Oof.
I can do that. Like it's gonna hurt." And so I walked in knowing that like I had to establish dominance in the household, and this was like I made a decision. Like I'm gonna
Yeah,
sell my soul, burn the boats. I put on the right song. I went for it, and I did not beat her. I got 4 minutes. I got
Pat.
I think 4:27 or 4:29, something right there.
Did you sleep in the garage that night or what?
Dude, well, I almost slept in the garage because I couldn't move. It was one of those ones where like it had a Fran-like feeling. It messed up the next 3 hours of my day. I had to call somebody on the phone, and I was coughing so much they were like, "Are you okay?" Like what?
You're like, no,
what hap-
honestly, I'm not.
What happened to you? The fastest. So that was me, and my wife trains a girl in the garage, a friend of a friend. She's in high school. She's like a motocross
Oh, cool.
motorcycle racer.
Yeah,
And
cool.
she can move that bike. She did it in just under 4 minutes, like high threes, which chapped my wife. She's like, "Oh, she's not." Then my wife tried it and didn't get her time. Then I didn't beat my wife. So it was this cascade of failures. But if somebody wants to try it, go ahead, do it. You get any ones that pop that bubble into your head as of late?
You know, it's funny. We did this. I drove down to Alabama a couple weeks ago and did a drop in at a really great CrossFit gym down there. Shout out CrossFit Impulse. They welcomed us. I had a couple friends with me. We
That
went out.
name sounds familiar.
It was awesome, man. Their community is so cool down there. But anyway, we did it was kind of a medley of these different couplets. And so it was with a partner, tag team style. And everything started with a 100-meter run. So I'll just
Okay.
put that out there. So it's a 100-meter run and then 10 toes to bar, tag your partner. So we did that for, I think it's been a week or so now. So it's 5 or 6 minutes, and then immediately into 100-meter run, 3 sandbag lifts to the shoulder, tagging out, and then immediately into 100-meter run and 10 pistols, alternating with your partner. And so it was one of those workouts where at first, you know, the effort in each of those intervals is not that long. And as it's a partner workout, you got plenty of recovery time. So you're hitting them really hard, but then it starts to dawn on you. You're like, wait a minute, we're doing 3 sessions of this back to back. It's like a 15, 16-minute thing, you know, or I guess 18 minutes if we went.
It's going to catch
6
up.
minutes, yeah. Yeah. And it was interesting. It was good. Haven't done anything like that that's that punchy, but that sustained in quite a while. It was good.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Well, it's always cool to hear the shout outs of the different gyms out there as well.
Yeah.
Oh, well, hey, everybody, we appreciate you. If you've got thoughts or inputs on this CrossFit versus traditional strength training, what's the differences? Who's the winner? Would you define strength training in a different way? Find this episode on the btwb YouTube channel. Post your thoughts under there. We read those things. If you have ideas for a future show, a topic, a question, a guest, post those there as well. Or you can go to the Varied Not Random Instagram account. You can post a public comment there. We'll see that. Or if you want to be more anonymous, you can send a direct message on the Varied Not Random Instagram account. That'll all come our way. So hopefully this was helpful for Bubbasaurus and for Adrian Bosman. I'm Pat Sherwood, and we'll see you next time.